Donc, merci d'être là. Je suis très, très heureuse de vous.
So it is a pleasure to see you again. This is the 20th edition of our Entretien Européen. We created them in 2002 with some of you. I will not name everybody because we did so last night during a very nice dinner. So we had 20 conferences, hundreds of articles, reviews, the letter of Les Entretiens Européens, and we will try one day maybe to compile all this for your perusal. We created the Entretien with François Lamoureux and Loyola de Palacio 20 years ago. And this was, of course, with the European Commission, and the European Commission always supported us these years, even though we don't always see eye to eye. But they are there. They are coming to our conference. They listen. They do not listen to everything, but we do hope that this year at least they will be listening a bit more, because of course we are in a completely new context, and I know that DG Energy will be in charge of designing the reform of the electricity market, and so there's a great deal to be achieved. So it will have to work with other institutions and, of course, civil society stakeholders, companies, but also authorities, local and regional authorities, which are the main consumers of energy. Now, you might remember that last year we concluded our conference on one proposal, which was to have a conference this year on geopolitical issues in the nuclear sector. We didn't think that, of course, we would see all that we have seen with the war in Ukraine, which was quite revealing because these geopolitical changes have been brewing for a while. We've seen our world being more divided in blocks with American pressure, which is unbearable. You know me. I mean, you know I'm provocative, so I can say that, and the Americans are very much on the front line. They will continue until they have eliminated the Russians and the Chinese from the international stage, but I don't think they will succeed. Anyways, this will generate a great deal of tension and conflicts and probably, well, retaliation as well. But of course, at the size of these conflicts, and this is very difficult to manage. Economic and social crisis as well. Philippe HERZOG might say a few words on this later. It might transform into a financial and monetary crisis as well. And I think that states are underestimating the nature of this crisis. Not all of them, though. There are articles in the Financial Times, for those who read it, explaining this and the ins and outs in a great deal of detail. And in France, Les Echos, which we like normally, say it's a crisis, but it's a temporary one. It will go away. Well, not quite. In the meantime, we are greatly affected, and it might last for years. Well, the climate crisis, of course, with the effects that are more and more visible and felt even in our countries and in the rest of the world. We've seen that this summer. The energy crisis is seen as a consequence of the energy, geopolitical, financial crisis. But this crisis, this energy crisis, I think, has been developing for 20 years. Maybe I'm estimating that, but at least it's been brewing for 10 years, I think. We had last year our 19th conference of Les Entretiens Européens. We concluded on the crisis because we already had gas prices skyrocketing. And we announced this crisis, but it was seen as trivial by the institutions, and I will not name anyone. We were told there have always been crises. There will always be crises. So why not anticipate? Because this time the crisis, economic, climate, energy, geopolitical, is actually a crisis that is expanding. The small crises are nourishing one another. And this global crisis, of course, requires and calls for urgent measures and unprecedented reforms. Short-term measures are needed because the poorest of all, need to be supported. But we also need long-term measures and decisions if we don't want to suffer greater consequences and see the situation getting worse. We will get back to this. I'm not saying that people are not aware of what they're doing, but Susanna, and I will repeat that to Massimo, of course, it will be part of our conclusions. We think that the measures adopted by the European Commission are not at the right level. And, of course, Commission and Member States. I've got nothing against the Commission. The Commission has to be there. It has to be reformed, indeed, but we need it. However, these measures adopted by the Commission are not part of a long-term reform. These measures do not take on board the inequalities between Member States and do not take on board the diversity of our national systems. Through Mrs. von der Leyen, I mean, I can't hear her voice anymore, and this is a personal opinion, of course. I have the feeling that they are there to save private Germany. And solidarity, but for the short term, and only for Germany, I'm sorry, but this is short-sighted. We need solidarity between all member states. Yes, indeed, Germany is an industrial power, and it is certainly the locomotive of Europe. And the countries that are weaker, it's not the fault of Germany, it's their fault, of course, we agree on that. But let's be careful, the German ambitions, including the military ambitions, this is a side comment, I will not repeat it, but they want to become leaders in armaments in Europe, and not with European weapons, by the way, but with American weapons. This is very serious. So solidarity is what was missing when the market, the energy market and the electricity market were developed. When the national systems were opened, we built a European market. We were in favor of that, but we said, be careful. Let's make sure it's properly balanced. We need a public policy. We need solidarity there. And the choices that went hand in hand with the creation of the market and the objectives that were offered by the Commission and ratified by the states, by the way, are objectives that we challenged. We anticipated the perverse effects of these objectives. It's been 20 years. I'm not saying that to say we were right before everybody else, but we were not listened to once. And as I said, we had conferences year after year, but nobody listened. So we'd like to be heard this time at least. Because if the gas prices are skyrocketing, it's because we are consuming too much gas. It's not because Russia is actually switching off the tap. It's because we consume too much. There's an issue with supply and demand on the market. But this is our responsibility. Of course, the war and the tensions make the situation worse. But I also think that the sanctions against Russia led to, of course, consequences. Putin is defending his interests. I never defend war, because I always think that there are all other solutions than war to solve conflicts. This is the very meaning of European construction. It's peace. It's solving our conflicts through laws. And so we are in a very serious period. Too many renewables on the market led to too much gas, because it weakened nuclear energy at the same time for market reasons. The market is promoting short-term investments, volatile prices, and competition between the states. And of course, when it comes to nuclear energy, we had our whole conference on this last year. Nuclear energy has its own specificity. Nuclear power requires deferred profitability, long-term investment, deferred profitability, public investment. This is something that we do not have on the European market. We need to rebalance the market with public policies, either removing or removing nuclear power from public policies. But that's for our debate. I will not anticipate, because we need long-term, stable and visible prices for investors, and we need cooperation. This market has to be reformed. Nuclear power has to be reformed. And this is the meaning of our conference. It's a 20-year battle, which I fought with Philippe Herzog and all of you. And we are are not letting go. I do not resist the temptation to show you this. I've got 20 copies of this. Investments in nuclear power in Europe, building a long-term framework for the valorization and investment in projects. Well, I've got plenty of those. This was in 2019, but I will send them all to you. You will see that we innovated, but we were not far off with our proposals. Now, of course, we will have a debate, but beyond this debate, we'd like to to see something concrete being developed before we die. Well, it's been 50 years that we work on this. I will not live for 50 more years. So if all this could become more concrete in the near future, that'd be wonderful. Let's mobilize the institutions and let's work together to find solutions, not one against the other, not us in demonstrations and the institutions pretending that they can't hear and they don't think it exists. Well, I haven't talked about nuclear power and all this, but we'll do so, of course, all day, because nuclear power is part of the solution for peace, for development, for the climate, for solidarity. It is a public good that needs to be defended and supported by the states making that choice, but also by the European Commission, because it is really very much in the general interest. And if some member states don't want to have any nuclear power, it's their choice. But of course, when electricity is missing, they ask for nuclear electricity from the grid. But we have no right to oppose those making a different choice or the Commission if it wants something else. But this is a battle that we need to win. The nuclear states in Europe are still, not in the majority. 10 have made a choice, and the population is greater than in other countries. So let's be active, proactive. Let's move proactively. Now, we have three parts in our conference. We'll first discuss the historical perspective of nuclear power. And with Emilia, whom I'd like to thank for being here, Emilia Yanis is the Director of Strategy for the European Nuclear Society. She will moderate the second table ronde. No, I'm sorry, it's the first one. I stand corrected. She will take the floor in 15 minutes. And then we'll see the evolution of the energy mix in member states in the context of this crisis and in the context of existing changes with electrification of uses and so on. We had a whole conference in Helsinki. I'd like to thank Juha for being here. Juha Pakola, thank you very much for being here. We actually we're ahead of the debate there. We realized last year that more electricity would be needed in the energy mix. Well, it's never too late, yeah, I suppose. Then we will examine the trajectory of the European energy mix and see whether or not we could change our mix and maybe balance it a bit more. And then we'll finish on cooperation and solidarity to be built on the market in the nuclear sector in order to finance investments, because we will need public-private partnerships, because the states on their own, because of the financial crisis and the interests being on the rise, they won't be able to pay with the poorest populations, with the economic crisis, social crisis, and so on. And then we'll have a look at the policies of the member states that are willing to develop an enhanced cooperation. And we'll discuss, of course, the sector and the fact that nuclear power is a public good in Europe. So these were a few preliminary words. We'll now listen to Rafaël Grossi. Rafaël Grossi is someone that you know very well. He's the Director General of IAEA. He's, of course, quite active these days. He was in Moscow the day before yesterday, and he recorded this video. I don't know where, on the plane or somewhere else, but I mean, he sent it just in time. So I give the floor to Rafaël Grossi. I wish you a very good conference.
Dear friends, dear colleagues, it is a pleasure for me to participate once more, albeit virtually, in a new edition of Les Entretiens Européens, a rendezvous, a meeting that brings together important actors at a very key moment for nuclear investment and energy writ large in Europe and around the world. As I send this short message to you, I am en route to Kiev as part of the IAEA's efforts to protect the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And I start with this reference because our success in preventing a nuclear accident in the context of the ongoing conflict will, in my opinion, have a key influence, perhaps a determining influence in enabling, allowing the nuclear sector to thrive and to deliver on the promise we all believe it is now possible. Il est évident que les conditions
It is obvious that the current conditions present opportunities, if not unique, at least completely new. And these opportunities are real. For the first time in years, we see that nuclear energy is considered openly and in a less polemical way as a solution to the convergence of problems caused by global warming and the energy crisis we are living at the moment.
happen, a number of things will also be necessary. At an institutional and policy level, certain things are moving in the right direction. But it's not so easy. We have seen in the European debates on and around the EU taxonomy the difficulties surrounding something which, for those working in nuclear, seem to be obvious. The qualification of nuclear energy as what it is, nothing that it is not, a almost carbon-free emission source of energy. So there is a responsibility at a political level that the level playing field, or at least comparable circumstances, exist so that investors, companies, governments take the decisions that are required with the confidence that is, of course, necessary. But at the same time, it is also important for the nuclear sector itself, for us, if I can use the collective identification, to deliver on what is expected. We have to deliver on safe, long-term operation, by far the easiest, cheapest, and more effective way to keep our energy options cheaper and affordable for our societies, and to keep some realism in the political commitments for global zero in terms of emissions. This is a frequently unsung hero in terms of what nuclear can provide. And the IAEA is working hard through its peer review missions to provide the necessary advice, support, and comparison of experiences that is necessary for operators to take decisions that are bringing already many of our nuclear power plants to horizons reaching 80 and perhaps beyond years. So that is very important. In terms of new nuclear, of course, many national sovereign considerations come to play in terms of taxation, in terms of the way in which investments in this area are encouraged and nurtured. From the IAEA perspective, we are also trying to support new nuclear. And when we say new nuclear, of course, we have in mind existing big nuclear power plants, but also the efficient and successful deployment of modularity, small modular reactors and even microreactors. But this is something that requires from nuclear regulators harmonization, as we call it, and from industry standardization. This is why the IAEA has launched NESI, the Nuclear Harmonization and Standardization Initiative, which is bringing together industry, government and regulators on an effort to provide a contribution, a real contribution in this regard. So I'm very happy to have had this opportunity to send you this line here en route to a mission that will help consolidate confidence in nuclear and at this troubled and demanding hours, peace in the world. So all success pour les entretiens européens.
I wish the Entretien Européen every success, and I hope to be able to join you in person next year. Thank you very much.